Light breaks the shadow of the weary heart. Truth cuts the dark like a flaming dart. Voices rising strong to lift the call. This is the time we give it all. Lynne Scott Haggerman bringing the fire. Words that ignite hearts burning higher. Faith and power, no chains can bind. Step into the light, leave fear behind.
Hello, everybody. I tell you what, I could dance every time I hear that song. It does not get old to me. It's brand new to me, just like it is to you. Thank you all for watching. I see more and more people joining from all social media platforms. Welcome to the Lynne Scott Haggerman Podcast on Patriots Prayer Network. God bless you all. Thank you for your time today. I'm so honored and blessed that you're joining the show. Before I get started, since I'm new to the Patriots Prayer Network, I like to take a couple minutes to share about my background before I bring the guest on, so that way you get to know me too, and I'm getting to know you in chat. So with my background, let me tell you who I am first, and then let me tell you my past. I'm an international human resource award-winning consultant. I help small businesses to Fortune 100 companies. I'm an independent LifeWave distributor. I'm also a marathoner. I'm a podcaster. I'm a weightlifter. I'm a child of God, a follower of the Lord Jesus Christ, and a friend of Holy Spirit. And God is absolutely good. Whenever I was tiny, from birth until 5 years old, I was trafficked in a trafficking house. Simultaneously, I was taken to a U.S. University medical center where I was experimented on in conjunction with the government, myself and many, many, many other children. I survived. I helped other children survive, and I saw many, many, many who did not survive. And I have been in deep healing for the past many, many years with the Lord Jesus Christ and a wonderful spirit-filled Christian therapist. And in January of last year, God activated me for such a time as this. And he said that he wanted me to share my story so people understood what was happening to the children and how they could help. The website that he had me create, his plan to help the children who've been trafficked with aftercare, as well as adults who've been harmed or trafficked or abused in any way, and those with trauma of any kind, is at qgrit.org, the letter Q, which stands for quantum. And in this case, God's going after this in a major big way. This problem is going to stop. QGRIT, GRIT.org is where you can find all of my information. And today, I would like to introduce you to Pam Files. James and Pam Files. James Files has written a book along with Pam, his wife, about how he was the shooter on the Grassy Knoll during the assassination of JFK. So, Pam, God bless you, and thank you for coming on the show today.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me. One correction, James Files did not write this book. He didn't write any of the books. He asked me to write the To Kill a Country first, and then I put Interview with History out, and then I put Primary Target out after he got out of prison, and he did not want more talking about it. He wanted it to just die and go away, and I'm like, no. The people need to know the real story, and they need to know more about you. And so in this book, Primary Target JFK, How the CIA Used the Chicago Mob to Kill the President, published in 2020, he didn't write it, and there's parts of it he didn't want to have me write and put in there about like his childhood, about his upbringing, how he came to be, being part of a Navy birthing program. His mother was part of that, and then I don't know when you want me to start talking about all that, but and then some of the parts in there about his other exploits besides the JFK assassination, where he was actually involved with Operation Group 40, a special group that was a worldwide assassination team, and George Bush Sr. was the head of that. And he was, James Files and Luis Posada Carrillos were some of the first men that George Bush Sr. recruited into that. The picture of him on Barry and the Boys, he didn't want that in the book. So I got some extra information out there that he didn't really want it to be in the book, but he's glad now that I did that. But at the time, it was a little bit stressful because he didn't want that out. But then he realized that once I was going to really get the story out there, he told me about being debriefed with the CIA right after the JFK assassination at the hangar that the CIA had at the Midway Airport. That's kind of on the outskirts of Chicago area. It's in Cicero. It's not the O'Hare Airport. It's a Midway one, kind of right in the middle of the town.
I've been there.
They have a hangar there, the CIA, where he gave him a CIA debriefing. And so when he told his CIA handler, who was also a mutual handler with Lee Harvey Oswald, David Atlee Phillips, when he gave him the CIA debriefing, he told him about the assassination, but then also that he had used a mercury round, an explosive round that a friend of his, Wolfman George Kalurid, had made for him to take down to Dallas, and he had used that round as that final headshot. And traces of mercury would always be found if you use a mercury loaded bullet. It'll always be there. There's always a trace of that. So that's when the president's brain went missing, because they couldn't allow that to be found, where all the evidence matches what he had said that early. And that was just like maybe 10 days, almost 2 weeks after the assassination. So they've known for a long time, what really happened. And James Files said one of the questions and answers in our book, we have a big section in it where when he was still in prison, people were able to ask him questions, and I would write the answers to him. And one of the guys was asking, well, how do we know that the CIA was involved, and that part of the story is true? And then he was saying, there's this place called the Vault. The CIA has a lot of documentation, hard paper things in there, and they also would probably have the tape that David Atlee Phillips took of my debriefing, so because it was tape recorded. So he said if they haven't destroyed that evidence, that would be something they could maybe ever stumble upon. But he said that once they realized that there was something that could be traceable to what he's telling the story about, the mercury load bullet, the body went missing, the brain went missing, and then he said that the body isn't actually buried in Arlington Cemetery, because that's what the family wanted, and that's what the CIA wanted too, because they were just basically getting rid of the evidence that could never be re-exhumed and subsequent autopsies. So that was a pretty big deal that he didn't want in there. And then he started cooperating, helping me with more of those details. And then the part about him being in the Navy birthing program, his mom was part of that.
Well, and Pam, if you could hold on just a second, Pam, let me I can hear the audience asking questions, and you're amazing. That the first thing people are wondering is, so with James, we know he's likely not going to come on camera. And so can you explain why we're having you on today instead of James with you also?
Okay. I wrote this book. This is our third book that we wrote together. Basically, I wrote it, and he made the history, and I'm the history person that writes about things. And so we're talking about our book, Primary Target, JFK, how the CIA used the Chicago mob to kill the president. It's kind of breaking news that, CIA used the Chicago mob. They always wanted to just kind of keep away from the CIA getting blamed for it. So they would have this as the background information. Sam Giancana got the assassins. Chicago mob. Yeah, but the Chicago mob can't cover up an assassination for 60 plus years, and in the middle of the Warren Commission orchestrate the cover up. The Chicago mob's good, but they're not that good. And so, basically, President Kennedy was assassinated, as everybody knows, down in Dallas, Texas in 1963, November 22nd. And we probably weren't going to get the whole story, but I saw a confession of an assassin video from Blockbuster back when they were on VHS tapes. I saw this and I thought, well, I have to go back a little bit more to get my story and started. But when I did find this, and it matched this book that I found in the church library, High Treason, Assassination of John F. Kennedy, What Really Happened, when I was looking for books about end times, Revelation, I wanted to know about the Bible, not JFK assassination. But anyway, this is the book that I found. And then this is a tape that I found back in the 90s, 1997, 1999. And then I wrote the letter, because at the end of this confession assassin video, the interviewer was asking James Files, he goes, "You've been around death and violence most of your life. Do you believe in God?" And James Files looked down and he goes, "I guess so. I found myself praying to him when I'm on hilltops surrounded, firefighting, and, there's nobody else to call out to. I guess I believe in God." And so when he had said that at the end of this whole, confessed to, taking everything down to Dallas and doing the assassination, and I'm like, well, that guy's still alive for some reason. God's still got him here. So maybe, I should just write him and say, thank you for telling us about what you did. But as far as that, I think I believe in God stuff goes, his name is Jesus. And, I wanted him to know who the Lord is and that he could forgive him if he, wanted to hear about it. And so I wrote him a letter in February of 1999. He wrote back, long story. He finally got out of prison in 2016. But when I went to visit him in the year 2000, I was in the visiting room at the prison at Stateville because he wanted me to come and see him and talk to him there. I'm like, I don't know. I've never been to a jail, let alone a prison, maximum security in Illinois. Anyway, we were in there in the visiting room. Are you still there?
I'm here. Yep, I'm listening.
Looks like
Can you hear me?
Cut
we
off.
have a bit of a, so we can still hear you. There's a bit of a lag for the audience to know. We have James in the background. He wasn't feeling well to come on camera. Can you hear me, Pam?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just don't know if anybody knows any of this story. Yeah.
We're going to assume they don't.
So anyway, he was in the visiting room. We were talking, and not too long after I first got there, and then he gets down on the floor, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, he grabs my hand, he looks at me, and he goes, "If I ever get out of prison, will you marry me?" And I'm like, I guess so, thinking in the back of my head, he ain't ever getting out. So that we always kid around about that. But once I said, if it's God's will or not, he said, well, I got a book I want to get out there to the people, and it's called To Kill a Country. And it was about overthrowing countries, being part of the CIA, where the, death squads kill people, take over countries and make things good for the CIA, bad things for the people that live there. Anyway, I said, are you talking to me? I mean, he goes, you have a way with words. I'm like, well, I'm not really into talking about killing countries and the CIA and killing people and killing the president and whatnot. And he goes, well, in our correspondence, you just, you have a way of making people understand things. So I trust you to do it, and I don't trust anybody else to do it. So I'm like, okay, I guess if it's that important. So our first book had a bunch of problems getting this thing out. Pretty thick book. We don't even want to talk about this. But then I got another book out when he was in prison called Interview with History, the JFK assassination. And then when he finally got out of prison, we didn't think he was ever going to get out. I told him, I'm finishing up the story and I'm putting all the details. And in the back, there's appendix with Joe West court case, the whole 9 yards. This one guy told us it's like the Bible of the JFK assassination. I go, don't ever use the word Bible in my book, same sentence, because, Bible's Bible, God's word's God's word. But this is the truth about what happened with the JFK assassination. So if anybody wants all the details, that's what we're doing, getting that book still out because that was published a few years back. But anyway, he was one of the two shooters that actually was there in Dallas. People say, oh, there was like a lot more shooters than that in Dealey Plaza, but he wants to just tell what he knows about the story that he knows. So when he tells a story, he talks about what he knows. And then when I talk about the things that went on, I understand the bigger picture because I studied about it. And when I got that book, High Treason, from the church library, before I even knew him, I read this and I talked to the pastor and I said, hey, they shot their way into power and they're still around doing stuff, bad stuff. We need to tell everybody at church. And the pastor's like, we're not talking about. I go, well, why is this at the church library? Why, if we're not supposed to talk about, JFK assassination, how come we're doing this? Church library. And he goes, well, don't get into the conspiracy stuff. It'll wreck your life. I'm like, well, wow. Kind of too late. I already know now what they did. We had a coup d'etat. Our government was overthrown. The military was involved. The fat cats in Dallas. It was a coup d'etat. That's when the government's thrown over and taken over, and so that's what happened to our country. So anyway, the pastor's like, don't. We don't want to go there. We don't want to talk about that. So I said, well, I'm going to keep talking about it, trying to figure out what's going on, and then that's when I found the Confession of Assassin video in the Blockbuster. Because all that other stuff was happening like in 97, 98. And then I found this in 99. So a long time ago, VHS tape, the young people don't even know what this stuff looks like, right? VHS tape.
Right.
That's how long ago it was. Bill Clinton was president when we met. You know what I'm saying? It was a while ago. So anyway, I didn't think he's ever getting out of prison. So I said yes.
So yeah, tell us the story.
I got lots of them.
I know you do. Tell us the story of what happened that day. What was the planning and what actually happened
in Dallas?
Yes, in Dallas.
Okay, for the Dallas story about JFK getting assassinated?
Yes, please.
Okay, so earlier in the year, in 1963, James Files, who lived in Chicago, Melrose Park, was a driver for Charles Nicoletti, and he's like a Chicago guy, hitman. I got pictures if you want to see him. I probably don't want to see him, but anyway, he was working for Sam Giancana and Tony Accardo, and those are like the main mob bosses back in the 50s and 60s and 70s for Chicago. And Chicago ran, a lot of stuff, not just Chicago, but a big wide area of the United States. And so he was at the Harlow Grill. This is like their little restaurant over there in Melrose Park. And Charles Nicoletti comes in and he's saying, we need to talk. And he said, okay. And then I got to finish this game. And he's like, now. And so he's playing pinball. And so they went for a drive and he says, we're going to do a friend of yours. The thing's spinning, so I don't know if it's still going. Anyway, he said, Charles Nicoletti said to James Files, his name was James Sutton at the time. He goes, we're going to do a friend of yours. And he goes, okay, whatever, because that's what they did. They went out and did, that kind of work. And he goes, no, not him. He's some guy that was robbing somebody from, some pinball machine, taking the money, skimming off it or whatever. He said, no, not him. The president, we're going to do JFK. And he goes, so that's fine with me, that's what we're supposed to do. That's fine. So anyway, they were supposed to do it in Chicago, and he even went. I put the picture of where it was in our book, Primary Target, because he showed me where it was. It was up by the Eisenhower Freeway, and there's this, they call it the bottleneck, where he would have been facing towards them in a car, and then they would have gotten shot on that freeway and then just kept going on the freeway. But Tony Accardo, the head of the Chicago people, the outfit, organized crime there, said there's no way that's going to happen in Chicago. We'll never get anything done. We won't be able to make money. We're not killing the president in our backyard. So anyway, they said, no, we're not doing it here. So the time will be right and it'll happen somewhere else. It'll just eventually happen. So they kind of put that on the back burners. And then closer towards the fall, like probably late October is when he got the word that they were going to do it in Dallas, and that he was going to be the driver. He was going to get the weapons ready. At this time, he didn't know he was going to be a shooter, but he was going to get the weapons ready and take Charles Nicoletti's car, a burgundy Chevrolet. And they called it a work car because they had special panels in it where they would put, their guns and whatever. And so he was supposed to take that car down to Dallas, drive down during daylight hours, and don't get pulled over for anything. Don't speed. Just get down there and get the weapons down there and check the area out. So we're still spinning.
I can still hear you, Pam. You're looking great. You're sounding great. Okay, she went off air for just a moment. So we'll wait for Pam to come back on.
I'm not gonna unplug anything.
Yep. We can hear you
Some
again.
note came up saying I have to unplug the router. I'm not touching my computer.
I wouldn't
because
either.
I'll wreck it. I'll make it so I go away. I don't want to do that.
You're doing
anyway,
great.
Where were we at? He was supposed to just be the weapons provider and drive down there so that the weapons would be down in Dallas, from Chicago down to Dallas.
Okay.
The week before the assassination. Okay. And so the week before the assassination, he was down there reconning the area. Somebody knocked on his door, opened it up. Lee Harvey Oswald's there. And people are like, what? Lee Harvey Oswald? Yeah, the real Lee Harvey Oswald. James Files and Lee Harvey Oswald knew each other from before because they had the same CIA controller, David Atlee Phillips. And he said, the boss sent me over here to show you around Dallas. He's like, okay. So they didn't talk about the assassination, but Lee Harvey Oswald was a really intelligent person. I'm sure he put two and two together. And he was one of the people probably that called the FBI and said, hey, they're going to kill the president. You got to do something to stop it. Anyway, and they went out and test fired weapons at this like a empty lot kind of on the outskirts of Dallas there by Mesquite, Texas. And even in the Warren Commission report, somebody said they thought they saw a couple teenagers out in that area shooting guns kind of around the time that Kennedy got assassinated. Anyway, I thought that was interesting that they even admitted that. But anyway, he was showing them around Dealey Plaza, that area. He was showing them around some other parts of Dallas, but just in that specific area so that he would know where to park, where the railroad yard was, where if he was going to maybe go into a dead end street or something like that. Anyway, he just wanted to know that area. And so Lee Harvey Oswald and James Files spent several days before the assassination together. Basically, he was his tour guide of Dallas, showing him around. And he said that they never talked about Dallas. Just in the trade craft and being in the CIA, you don't talk about certain things. But then later on, he did tell me, and I did put it in our book, Primary Target, that night, David Phillips was in Dallas, and he wanted him to come and talk to him right before this was going to happen. The next day was the 22nd. So he went and met him in a small little restaurant in downtown Dallas somewhere, and told him basically, if you have any problems with the assassination, because you're still a driver. But I think they knew that James Files was going to end up being a shooter, because the main controller, Ed Lansdale, for the grounds controller for the whole Dealey Plaza when it was happening, he had used James Files as an assassin before. JFK. JFK wasn't the first time he ever pulled out a gun and shot somebody. He was trained at the Camp Hero by age 10 to be a killer, and then he was in the military in the 82nd Airborne. He had 17, I think, confirmed primary target kills by the time he got out of the 82nd Airborne, and he was recruited into the CIA and out of the Veterans Hospital. So he went directly from the military into the CIA, and they took him and used him for whatever they wanted to use him for. Basically, his whole life as an assassin, that he had to call every day when he wasn't in a prison. He had to call in and check in with his CIA handler, David Outley Phillips, and find out if he had work to do. That was news to me after I published that book, even, because like, you didn't tell me you had to call him every day. And he's like, yeah, every day. I'm like, wow, that's pretty intense. So yeah, he was on standby to be a Jason Bourne kind of assassin, as soon as he told him where to go. Well, meet me at the airport. You got plane tickets waiting, or, meet me at such and such restaurant, whatever. Or you got the day off. You don't have anything to do. So have a nice day, whatever. But he had to check in every day to see if he had somebody to do that to. Anyway, back to the JFK assassination. David Phillips was at that restaurant and telling them if he had any problems to go to the Texas Theater. If you guys run into any problems, come to the Texas Theater and we'll extract you from there. And then he said, I'm going to tell this to Lee Harvey Oswald too. And so I guess Oswald came to that restaurant later, and David Phillips told him same thing. And Oswald definitely went to the theater thinking that that's where he was supposed to go if there was problems. And, he realized at that point he was a patsy and he was going to get blamed for everything. So anyway, James Files, he said, I never trust anybody for my extraction. So I just get away, whatever. I'm always going to plan that. So even if they told me to go there, I wasn't going to go there. Could smell a trap, right?
Right.
So anyway, that's one of the reasons he's 83 now, because he didn't always just do. He was a real instinctive person about trying to survive all this stuff. And part of the reason he didn't want to talk about certain things that happened even later on that night that aren't in the book but came out later is because for him being a person that has throughout history done a lot of assassinations and crime, killing, and all that kind of stuff. There's no statute of limitations for the crime of murder. So if anybody, of course, he says, nobody's going to ever prosecute me for killing President Kennedy. But some of these other people I've killed, some prosecutor probably wants to put a plaque up on the wall saying, I got James Files for this one. So he has to be careful about what he talks about while he's still alive. Otherwise, Anyway, with Jim Manning, he let it rip, and we were talking about stuff that was supposed to be deathbed confession stuff, and he just said, I don't care, just say whatever and whenever. I'm like, really? Chappaquiddick too? Yeah, just say it. I'm like, wow, that's intense. So, back to Dallas. James Files was supposedly asked at the end to be a shooter, but I think they kind of planned. David Phillips and Ed Lansdale, they kind of planned all along that, he's going to be there with Charles Nicoletti, and they're both capable of killing somebody. But as far as somebody being a sniper and being accurate and one shot, one kill, that would be James Files for, his whole military thing, his childhood and military, CIA work, death squad, that would be him to make sure if he was there, JFK wasn't going to leave Dealey Plaza alive if they knew that he was going to be on call and he was one of the primary shooters going after the primary target. So that's exactly what happened. He was counting the shots as they were ringing out in Dealey Plaza because he was positioned behind the picket fence on the Grassy Knoll. And right. Charles Nicoletti was in the Dowtech building on the second floor where they had gotten in through Eugene Brading, who had connections with the people that owned the building, the Hunt people from Dallas. Anyway, Charles Nicoletti was shooting from behind at the Dowtech building, and James Files was just positioned behind the fence, but he was supposed to only take a shot if it was necessary, and they were trying to get everything from behind. So he's counting it, miss. He could hear the shots going off, miss, because they were going for the headshot. And then when the limousine had already turned off of Main Street onto Houston, onto Elm, and then Elm Street. He was coming down the street, miss, and then as he was fixing to lose his field of fire, where Jackie would have come into the field of fire. If he would have taken a shot, it would have maybe hurt her, and they were told nothing happened to Jackie. So he took the shot, and that's the one that everybody remembers, blowing his head off and blowing it.
So for those in the radio audience, we've lost her image for a few seconds again. I'm confident she'll be able to come back in. And
Are we back?
We're back. We're back.
Did you hear any of that? Miss, and then he took the shot from behind the fence with the fireball, Remington XP 100 fireball.
That's where you blanked out. So I heard you say he took the shot from behind the fence. So, okay, is that the gun that he used then? A picture of it?
It's not the actual gun. It's the type of gun. It's a Remington XP 100. Okay. It's called the Fireball. They created it for the CIA and the FBI. They made 500 prototypes. This guy, Wayne Leake, down at Remington did that. And he got one of the prototypes, and it actually had been used 2 other times before it was used on President Kennedy for assassinations. And he won't tell me who they were, and I probably don't need to know. But it's an assassination gun, and they call it a varmint gun because it's a bolt action and single shot bolt action, and it's basically an assassin gun. You have to know what you're doing to use it because there's no reloading and second chance. So, but if you got a mercury load in that kind of gun and you're at maybe 88 feet away, yeah, and you can hit it without a scope, and you got a scope on there, President Kennedy didn't have a chance. So anyway, so yeah, Charles Nicoletti and James Files were the primary shooters, but they won't name anybody else, but there were more than those 4 shots being fired in Dealey Plaza. There's the sign getting hit, the curb getting hit, the grass getting hit, James Tague getting hit, the piece of concrete came up onto his cheek. I mean, I know there were other people shooting, but he can only pinpoint the fact that Charles Nicoletti was shooting from behind and he was shooting from behind the fence. So that's what he always sticks with. But I got a feeling there was a few other shooters there. But they weren't good shots, and they really shouldn't have been considered, an expert shooter, because you're supposed to only need 1 shot if you're a shooter like that, not miss.
So what happened after? Anyway. What happened after he fired the weapon? What did James do? What were the events after that?
Okay, well, he was behind the picket fence. I got pictures of it. Just of him standing by the picket fence, but pretty much people know what I'm talking about. The picket fence on the Grassy Knoll. After he took the shot, I'm trying to think. He ejected the shell casing, stuck it in his mouth. He put the gun away, reversed his jacket, put his hat on because he had the plaid thing out, and then he had more of a plain color, gray color on the inside, just to kind of like change his appearance. He put a hat on and he reversed his jacket. And then he took the shell casing and stuck it on the fence. And it was a 221 shell casing. And the one that was found in Dealey Plaza later was a 222. I'm not a gun expert, but I know there's a difference between a 221 and a 222. Sure. So at that shell casing that somebody hasn't paid lots of money for, that, oh, this is it. No, it's not. It's a 222. The one that he shot out of the Remington fireball at President Kennedy was a 221, just for the record. Anyway, put it on the shell casing on the fence, and turned around, grabbed the briefcase, turned around, walked out. And as he was walking out of Dealey Plaza from behind the fence towards the not Deltec building, the Texas School Book Depository building, he walked right by it, and who but George Bush Sr. was standing there against the building with his foot up against the wall, and they didn't talk. They made a little bit of eye contact, but they didn't talk to each other. But he walked right past Bush Sr. in Dealey Plaza right after he shot JFK. So yeah, George Bush Sr. knew that happened and when it happened because he was there. He can't remember where he was that day, but I think everybody else remembers where he was for him. Anyway, then he got in the car, and Charles Nicoletti and Johnny Roselli were already in the car because they had come out of the Daltex building and got in and were just waiting for him to come back from behind the picket fence. And they took off, and Johnny Roselli reached around because he was in the back seat. Charles Nicoletti was in the front seat, passenger seat. And he goes, "Here's the brass. I picked up Chuck's brass. Here's the," meaning, the empty shell casings from the shots that Charles Nicoletti was taking with his, I think it was a 30-06 rifle, Mauser rifle. And that weapon was already in the trunk, and James Files' briefcase that had the fireball was in the back seat. He ended up taking him down to a gas station where they got out of the car, like the parking lot of a gas station. I'm waiting until this comes back because I don't know if
we can hear you just fine.
Anyway, and then they got Charles Nicoletti and Johnny Roselli got out of the Chevy Impala Burgundy, and then James Files went back to his motel in Mesquite, and he just waited until it got a little bit dark before he wanted to take the weapons out of the car and then clean them. But when he was waiting, he hears this knock on the door. He's like, "Now what?" And so he opens the door, and this childhood friend of his, Gary Marlowe's standing there, and he goes, "I need to talk to you. I had to burn a cop. I got a gun. I got to get rid of it." And he's like, "I got enough problems. I don't need your gun. Take it and get out of here. Forget that you saw me. Go away." So yeah, that's the guy that ended up being the one that was guilty of shooting that cop, J.D. Tippett.
Yeah.
Oswald didn't shoot the cop, and he didn't shoot the president. So Lee Harvey Oswald didn't shoot anybody. Just like when he was arrested and in Dallas police custody, he goes, "I didn't shoot anybody. I'm just a patsy." He was telling the truth.
Yes.
He didn't shoot anybody. He was just a patsy.
So Judith Berry Baker, who was his girlfriend at the time, I had her on my other podcast on Rumble, the Lynne Scott Haggerman Show, and I had her on, I want to say, a couple months ago. So she did a very thorough job of explaining Lee Harvey Oswald. Judith Berry Baker. And so I've had her on my show.
Oh, okay, Judith. Yeah, I know who she is.
Judith. And I also wanted to reference, you have, so with James not feeling good today and being able to be on screen himself, you and James have been on Michael Jaco's show many, many times on Rumble. So I just want to encourage people, to encourage people that if they want to hear even more of this story and all of the angles, I'm going to try to cover as much as we can today. But I wanted Pam to share, and James is in the background to answer any questions if we need him. But I wanted to talk about the JFK assassination today, possibly get into his childhood and his history so people understand how this could even come to be. But if you want more information, James Files and Pam have been on Michael Jaco's show several times, so you can get even more details. And again, I've had Judith Berry Baker on my Rumble show, the Lynne Scott Haggerman Show, in the past couple months ago, and I'm going to be having her on again. So Pam has, the internet has left again. We have been having technical difficulties since probably about 30 minutes before I hit record. You're back, Pam.
If you were talking, I couldn't hear you and I couldn't see you.
That's okay.
But we're trying.
We're going to do this, and we are doing it actually. And so I was just sharing more information again about, where
What's
they
the
could
question? I mean,
no question yet. So go ahead. Go ahead with your story where you left off.
Okay, well,
go ahead.
Basically, that was it. I could talk a little bit more about before and, him getting into the position of being there. But if you would just want to hear more about him afterwards, he cleaned the weapon, and then the next day he drove back to Chicago. And then he didn't make it all the way for daylight hours. I think he stopped somewhere, Missouri or one of those places. I wrote it down, but he didn't drive during the nighttime hours. And then he got back up into Chicago, and then he took the weapons back to Wolfman, and basically it was back to business as usual. Him and Charles Nicoletti were back to doing the Chicago outfit stuff.
So
And I go, well, did you talk about it? I go, did you say anything? He goes, no, we don't sit around and talk about that kind of stuff. But I guess over there at the Armory, which is this restaurant in Forest Park over there by where Sam used to live in the suburbs of Chicago, and the FBI had the restaurant bugged, and they heard before, during, and after the Sam Giancana talking about the JFK assassination, but they couldn't use those tapes. The FBI couldn't use those tapes against the Chicago people because they were the bugs were put in there illegally. So they knew what was going on, but then they couldn't, use it as evidence against them. But the FBI knew, and of course J. Edgar Hoover was in on it. The night before they had a big party for him, that he was going to be, one of the main people that was going to help orchestrate the cover-up.
So I've not heard that story.
Murchison's party, that whole thing.
Okay. Which I have not heard that either.
Yeah.
So to go back in time a bit, so James, getting to this point, I can hear people thinking, how does a man get to the place where he just does this without second thought, and then just proceeds on with life? So tell me about his background, how he was born, his childhood. Tell us a bit more about that so people can understand who he was.
His mom was looking for work, and she was in a poor family, and she already had a daughter, Jim's sister, and actually a brother too. Her name was Mary Pearl, and his name was Henry, but they called him Hank. Anyway, she was poor and living with her folks and living in Alabama, and then she met some Navy captain. His name was Les Sutton, and he told her about in Mobile, Alabama, that they had a Navy birthing program and they might accept her and she might be able to make some money doing that. That's why she did it, because a
Navy birthing program. What is a Navy
birthing program? Just kind of it's like what the Nazis were doing, trying to create a perfect Aryan soldier.
Yeah.
The United States was doing it too. And he said there's 123 of them in his class when he went to Camp Hero, and he thinks a lot of them were people that were conceived in the same way he was, that they were trying to create super soldiers. And so he said only 14 of them graduated from Camp Hero, but he thinks that some of them were used in experimentations at Brookhaven Laboratories, which is this other CIA Nazi thing going on over there, where they were trying to do time travel and all sorts of weird stuff. And so, but he wasn't used for that, but he was trained as a 8-year-old kid, 9-year-old, 10-year-old kid, how to hit a target with knives, like a human target, and then he could hit the kill zones every time. Of course, he was proficient with shooting firearms before he was even at Camp Hero, because when he was a little kid, his grandma, mom, dad, not dad, but mom and grandpa would send him out to go get a squirrel or rabbit for breakfast, and he'd sit there in the dusk or dawn, when it's starting to get light, and watch the trees move, and he'd hit moving targets since he was like a 5-year-old kid with a rifle. So he was shooting for a long time. And then
so Pam, if we don't have a lag, I have to back you up just a second, because my mind's trying to comprehend what you're saying. So his mother went into a birthing program in the military.
I wish this stream was better, because it cuts out your questions.
Okay, so I'll try, and if not, we'll just have you continue. So she was in a birthing program in the military to create super soldiers.
Yes.
Are they still doing that?
But at the time, she probably wasn't. I think so. I can't prove it, but I think so. I mean, you were saying, why would they give up all that research? And then now they're doing it with robotics and, you know, the physiological, they're doing the technical too. They're incorporating technology as well as biology, whatever it's called, when they, you know, mix certain genes together. It's really staggering to think of what they're able to do.
So then, if he was in this birthing program, how did they let him go home to be with his mom? I would have thought they would have kept him on the military base to train him.
See, what they did was they needed him at the Camp Hero. It's over there on Long Island, Montauk Island, Long Island. And I go, well, would your mom drive you? I mean, how'd you get to Camp Hero? And how long would you be there? He goes, I'd be there like 6 months at a time. And she'd put me on the Greyhound bus and send me off. And then I'd get on the Greyhound bus and go back to Melrose Park and, you know, back to, you know, hanging out with my friends that I didn't have to go to school with.
And he was 5 years old.
He told the kids that he was in a military school, and that's why he didn't go to regular school.
And
He started going to Camp Hero when he was 8.
8 years old. I can't. So okay,
he was
but I'm
5 when he started shooting rabbits and squirrels, and he actually shot a man when he was 5 too. This black man came on the property, and the dog was barking at him like, you know, woof woof, you know, you're an intruder, go away. And he took his machete and he killed his dog, and he went and got the, you know, the things you pull back, the big old, you know, double barreled shotgun, and he could barely even handle it, you know, because he was such a little kid. And the guy was like, oh, so what are you going to do with that? He goes, I'm going to shoot you for killing my dog. And then he shot him and he killed him. And he was 5 years old. He doesn't like me telling that story, but
he was a trained assassin from the time he was a small child. So we've lost you, Pam, temporarily. We have your picture, although it's frozen, and I'm sure you'll come back in a second. And so I'm learning this too, audience, as you are in lifetime. And I have heard much of this story listening to the past shows on Michael Jaco's Rumble channel, which again, I encourage everyone to go back and listen. James is also on many of those because he felt better. His health has been waning rapidly, and he felt much better in the past. And thankfully, he knows the Lord now. That's amazing what God can do to redeem people. It's also a story of redemption, which we probably won't have time for today, but you'll be hearing some of that on Michael Jaco's show. But we have heard similar things from others being trained at very young ages to perform operations. I was on a show with a gentleman myself. Okay, Pam, so you're back.
I'm back.
You're back. Okay.
The government studied his background and they tried to discredit him, but they did all sorts of research in this 92-page document, and we're going to start putting these out too so people can see that. Special thanks to Michael T. Griffith, United States Department of Justice. They were trying to discredit his original confession of assassin thing that was put out in 1994 and then released to the public in 96.
Yes.
So this story has been out for like over 30 years. It's just been suppressed. And the guy that owned this tape before, Dick Clark, with the MPI production, Dick Clark.
Yes.
He was threatened when they did this report, and then he wanted to do like a full-on series and get all this information out back in the late 90s. They told Dick Clark, you try and do that, you know, your name's going to be a byword, and you know, we'll take your license away from you. You're not doing this. So back in the late 90s, we still had yet to finish up with Bill Clinton. We had yet to do George Bush Sr., 9/11. You know, we weren't done yet. So they didn't want this much truth about, you know, what really happened getting out there in the mainstream back in the late 90s.
Right.
So, yeah, it's been a real journey to try and get this information out, but we're doing it.
Yes, you are. And you have been on, You are doing it. What other shows have you been on for people to be able to follow and hear more details? Because I know you have been telling you and James have been telling so many details. I know you've been on Michael
I'm not
Jaco.
ignoring you. I just can't hear your questions.
Oh, okay. Well, then let's make it simpler for you.
Mhm.
Which part of, we have about 10, 15 minutes left. What part of the story would you like to share next? I'm not sure if you
I
heard
heard
that.
which, and then I didn't hear it.
So I'll keep
Which
talking.
what?
Which part of the story would you like to share next about James? What do you think is also important for people to hear? I'm not sure if you can hear me yet. Is there another part to James'
Yeah.
background?
What else is important for people to hear?
Yes. Thumbs up.
Well, just that he worked for the CIA and he worked for the Chicago mob. But if push came to shove, when he called, they needed him for the CIA. He would just let Sam and Chuck know that he's not available and he had to go do some CIA work. You know, they knew why he had to go. They knew he was part of the CIA. Sam Giancana was used by the CIA too, back with the Bay of Pigs and some of the assassination plots against Castro. That Sam Giancana was he was down there in Miami with those guys that were down there for the Bay of Pigs, and then he used to call them the three amigos. Him, Sam, and Sam used to call the three of them Sam Giancana, Johnny Roselli, and James Files, the three amigos, when they were down there. And he just thought it was pretty bad that he never got a get out of jail free card because he used to work for the CIA. And he just thought that they would be a little bit more loyal to him because he had put his neck out there to try and help him with the assassination plots. But as we know, they're not loyal to anybody. They use people and discard them when they're expendable elite. Right.
Right. Yes.
I don't know. Operation Group 40, the cross-border assassination squad that he was part of, that,
Okay.
That whole To Kill a Country book, and, Chile and
Yes.
overthrowing governments and all South Central America and death squads and lining up people on the sidewalk and throwing them in the river. And just, I don't know how much stuff you want to hear about. Did that as a CIA person under orders. He didn't just fly down to South or Central America and decide to, start a war. He did it for our government.
So tell us about that. We have probably 10 minutes left, whatever you'd like to share. So for our radio audience, our internet is down again. We may be closing shortly after this because the internet connection is so bad. Again, the problems with technology began about 30 minutes before showtime. And just interesting things. You're back, Pam. Can you hear me? I can see you now. Can you hear me, Pam? You're frozen. You're back.
I'm trying to hear you.
You're back. So just continue talking with whatever.
Barely. You're cutting out. I can hear certain words, and then the thing's spinning, and then I can see your mouth kind of moving, but I can't hear the words.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is, I'm not sure what you can hear. And so audience, I think that that's going to be all that's going to be shared today. I do believe that the full information, at least the top story, the bottom line of what she knew about James Files' involvements with the assassination of President Kennedy, she's already communicated. So I'm going to be ending this show in just a minute or so if she doesn't come back because the connection's so bad. But we've been on for close to an hour. And so I believe we have the information we need. Again, I encourage you to go to Michael Jaco's Rumble channel, several interviews with James and Pam Files, where you can find out more. So I'm going to close off the show and wish everybody just God bless you all. Thank you for hanging in with us during the technical difficulties. And until next time, Godspeed to us all.
flaming dark.